Well, good evening and welcome to Just Be the Bank. This is Dave Steck, and I'm joined by my son Josh. And we're here tonight to talk about how you and your family can create passive, recurring income and wealth as a private lender in real estate. Now, this isn't just some long tagline, it's literally what Josh and I have done to create tens of millions of dollars in incremental revenue for our companies and for ourselves in the last 8 years, while in parallel, I've added two zeros to my net worth, and Josh has actually added eight to his net worth from scratch. So we're excited to share what we're going to talk about tonight. So let's get started. If you're on this webinar, you obviously fit into one of three groups. And this is for all three of those groups. You've never heard of private lending before, or it may be that you know about private money lending, but you've never made a loan, or you're actively making private loans with your and possibly other people's money. The one thing that we all have in common is that you and I have money to invest, and we simply want to earn double-digit returns in real estate while making safe and successful decisions. That's really it. The other reason that we're on the call is to try to find out how to crack the code on time freedom. It's a goal that we can all relate to. The notion of working less, having more fun, and making the same amount of money or more with a lot less effort. Now, if you're a medical practitioner like this guy, that's one way to make a living, and it's not a bad living, and many of you have. Or you could potentially do what Dr. Todd's doing here at a recent event that we did in Puerto Rico, doing a backflip off of a catamaran on a private island. Which would you prefer to do? Well, let's back up and talk about who we are. Again, this is Dave Steck, and for those of you who don't know me, I spent the first 20% of my life in a trailer park. Then I spent 20 plus years in corporate America with Kodak and Disney. And the good news is I had some firsts. I launched the first disposable camera for Kodak, the first digital postcard for Disney, made billions of dollars. The problem is I couldn't get rich because I was making that money for someone else. So I early retired and then became an entrepreneur. And I even early retired as an entrepreneur three times and took three 6 month life sabbaticals. And if you've never taken a 6 month sabbatical, either to recharge your batteries or because you have a bigger why, I'd highly recommend it. I didn't begin in real estate until 2002, and that research led me to get out of the market in 2005 and 6 before the 2007 crash. And I'm now the CEO and have been for Purpose Built Investments, which I co founded with my son Josh, who's on the line, in 2009. And we've done over 7,000 private loans at this point. I also prepared this thing called a State of the Union for real estate investors. And funny enough, delivered it three times at Harvard in 2005 before the crash, 2008 after the crash, and in 2011 when we were at or near the bottom of the market. And I recommended that everyone go all in real estate. Well, that's me. Josh, why don't you talk a little bit about your background? And I'm sure everyone's going to be more interested in it than they are in mine.
Oh, maybe. Well, cool. Thanks. It's great to be on. Great to meet everybody. Thanks for taking the time out of your evening to join us. I'm going to start in a bit of an unexpected place, which is my upbringing. After all, I'm not in my late 60s like the old man. So my five closest friends and I lived within walking distance of each other in the same neighborhood in San Diego. We all went to the same public high school, and I ended up being the only one that went to college. And by some miracle, I ended up with a couple degrees from Stanford. And I've been asking myself a lot lately, especially as I've had my son and I'm on the verge of having a second. How'd that happen? How did I manage somehow to stand out from the crowd and get into Stanford? And it's been really clear to me since I had a son that it was because I had great parents. I had parents who cared, parents who made me understand the value of hard work and education. So like a lot of you on the line, you're being great parents to your kids, and I benefited from that. So I appreciate everything you did for me there, Pops. So upon graduating, I really did face a decision. So most of my friends were going into becoming a consultant or an investment banker. That was very typical for Stanford graduates. Or I could maybe blaze my own trail. And so I talked to my dad about my options, and he actually advised that I do the latter. And actually, I ended up joining him as soon as I graduated, and I helped build purpose-built investments for 4 years. And 4 years later, in 2013, I faced another really big decision, which was continue doing really well with my dad at Purpose Built Investments. We were buying and flipping a lot of homes, a couple hundred. We were making just over 1,000 private loans in less than 3.5 years at that time. And we'd done vacation rentals. We were doing all sorts of really fun, cool stuff, and we were making good money. But I was in my late 20s and I wanted to do something crazy. And I was presented with the opportunity to do that in 2013, which was to reshape the future of mortgage technology. So talked again then to my dad, and his goal has always been really clear, which is for me to outgrow him as fast as possible. And I think we both agreed at that point that that was the way to do it. So I ended up joining Lending Home. Lending Home, I was one of the first 4 founding partners. And over the course of those 4 years, we grew the company to 400 employees. We raised $200 million of venture capital to fund the business. And we built a company that's worth more than $1 billion today. That experience totally transformed my perspective, not just on business, but specifically on the industry that we were disrupting, which was hard money lending, or the short-term bridge lending against residential properties, which is what we're talking about tonight. And so Lending Home became the largest ever lender in that space. And we've now made more than 25,000 loans across the country. And so with Lending Home up and running, I actually wanted to face my next challenge. So this was in mid 2018. I decided to make another change, and I started a company called Sunday. I teamed up with the former chief financial officer of Airbnb, and he and I decided to build the first national fix and flip brand. So I kind of ended up getting back on the other side of the business and buying and renovating and reselling homes. And we're doing it in a very different way, which I won't get into because it's not the topic of conversation tonight. But we're now at 47 team members. We've raised a lot of equity capital from venture capitalists, and we're helping a ton of people every month get out from under some of these kind of distressed homes. So that's kind of my background. So although I've moved away from the lending side of real estate with the Sunday move, it really does remain one of my passions. And so my dad and I decided to revive Just Be the Bank to teach others how to build the same legacy for their family that we were able to through private lending. So that's why you're all here tonight, and that's why we're sharing some wisdom with you as best we can. So with that, back to you, Pops.
Great. Thanks, Josh. We created Just Be the Bank for one primary reason, and that was to help others create what we've been able to create ourselves. So this is a picture of the first event that we did about 2 months ago in San Francisco to a room full of people that you'll see in a second. It was unbelievable, and the reaction was even better. And our whole philosophy was, if we could dramatically reduce your learning curve with insider training and tips that we've used to build multi-generational wealth through private lending, why couldn't we teach you to be able to take it to a level like we have? And even if not, you could do exceptionally well for you and your family. So after more than 30,000 loans, I think we've encountered just about every deal, every borrower, every market, and every profit structure. And thankfully, it's a lot less complicated than you might think. And what we've been able to do is condense that 8 years into one weekend. So if you're new to private lending, you may be rightfully asking yourself a great question right about now. And that is, why should I even be the bank? Why should Just Be the Banks be something that I'm even interested in? And the answer is, if you look at the skyline of any major city, what do you see? You see a lot of tall buildings. But at the top of those buildings, you see something very interesting. And this happens to be in London, where I lived for 3 years. And at the top of every bank, or at the top of every building rather, is a bank logo. So when people joke about, well, banks are where the money is, yeah, both in terms of where the money's being held and the profits that they're enjoying. The question I always ask myself is, who will the banks not loan money to in real estate? And you may or may not know the answer, but if you don't, it's these folks. You've seen a lot of these shows on TV: Flipper Flop, Desert Flippers, Flipping Vegas, Flipping Boston, Flipping San Diego, you name it, it's out there. Flipping is who the banks don't really want or don't want to loan to, and flippers are not the people that are at the top of the food chain when it comes to people that the conventional banks want to loan to. And yet the number one need of flippers is money. And that's where you and I come in. You see, the opportunity is undeniable. Flipping popularity has skyrocketed, and that's led to private lending growth. The difference, and I guess the beauty, is that flippers do all the work. Lenders simply loan the money and get more money back. And the question I've always asked myself is, which sounds better to me and which sounds better to you? Josh and I flipped 73 homes in 2 years in Vegas. We were basically flipping a home every 10 days. And I can tell you, it wasn't as simple as it looks like on TV. The bottom line is, you and I have the money that real estate investors need, because flippers can't get financing that they actually need from conventional banks or what are called public sources. So they use private sources like lenders and, like you and me. And in exchange, they pay you double-digit returns. It's really that simple. Now, you might be saying, well, hold on, give me an example for a minute. Okay, let's say a high net worth individual like you or me that has a fair amount of cash agrees to make a loan to a real estate investor operator, somebody like a flipper. Now, you could loan to someone who's not a flipper, but let's use the flipping example because that's where most of the volume is done. Now, let's say the flipper buys a home for $55,000 and it needs $15,000 in rehab in order to resell it for $100,000. So that's a $70,000 need that the investor operator, otherwise known as the flipper, has, and they don't have the cash to do it. A traditional bank won't help them, so the flipper turns to a private lender like you or me. So sometimes we're called a hard money lender. And in all cases, we loan 85 to 100% of the capital that's needed, and we get a nice return for doing so. Now, the investor, who's the operator or flipper, eagerly takes the loan in exchange for the opportunity to flip that home and get the end profit. Our desired outcome as a lender is to make sure that they make more money than we do, because the more money they make, the more we eventually make over time. And now we're paid back our principal, our interest, and our origination fees, and we make a considerable amount of money, a double-digit return. So let me show you the numbers. On a typical flip loan, and let's say we're only looking at an interest rate on a $100,000 loan. As you can see here, it's a 12% interest rate, and 12% per year is 1% per month. So on a $100,000 loan, it's $1,000 per month in interest. That's a payment that you would likely get either by ACH or wire or by check, and it would come in like clockwork every month. What's the return on that money? 12%. Pretty simple. Well, let's now add what are called origination points. So these origination points are a fee, a one-time fee to a flipper in order to originate their loan. And in this example, let's use 3%. So at the beginning of the loan, at the time it closes, you get $3,000 as the lender. And again, you get $1,000 a month, let's say for 6 months, because this is a 6-month loan. So you probably net funded the deal. In other words, because you're getting $3,000 at the same time you're giving them $100,000, all you have to do is send them $97,000 and then start collecting $1,000 a month. So now what's your annual return? 18%. All right. Is there any other money that we could make as a private lender? Yes. Typically, lenders charge due diligence fees and payoff fees. And let's just say, for simplicity, we'll round to $1,000 for due diligence and we'll round to $500 for payoff. That is pretty typical for some of the largest private money lenders. So let's use that number, and all of a sudden, our yield or our annualized return jumps to 21%. So that's not bad. Is that logical? Or is there anything more that we could extract from a funding like this? Well, what if we turned the money not every 6 months, but we turned it every 3 months or 90 days? Well, the same numbers, 12% interest, 3% points, same due diligence fees, same payoff fees, but because we've got our money out half as long, produces an annual return of 30%. Well, what if, in addition to turning it quicker, we actually got what's called an ES, or an equity share, otherwise known as a profit share? If in this case we were to add an equity share, and we don't do these very often, but we used to do them a lot when the market was at or near the bottom, and we'd get a kicker of 25% of profit. So if it was a $30,000 profit and we got 25% of it, now our yield has jumped to 60%. The point I'm making is that there are a lot of ways to make money as a private lender, and as it turns out, all of them generate at least double-digit returns for you. Now, there are 6 F's of real estate, and it's really important to understand these because what we're doing is the funding. But funding is one of those 6 F's. First, you've got to find it. Then you've got to figure it, make sure the numbers make sense. Then fund it. Then you've got to fix it or rehab it. Then fill it if you're going to rent it. And then flip it at some point. Well, let's look at each of those 6 from an effort to return standpoint. Let's say that you're the active investor operator, the flipper, and let's say you do all 6 of those things. You've got to find it, which is a lot of work, then figure it, fund it, fix it, fill it, flip it. You got to do a lot of work to actually get to the point where you get a payday. By contrast, a private lender, instead of working hard, works smart. They basically fund the deal. They write a check and get a bigger one back at some point in the future or along the way. For me, it's all about effort to return ratio. And when we originally got into lending, I compared lending to our flipping business, our active investor business, and I put down 12 original metrics that I wanted to identify and compare everything to for the perfect business. These were my wants. I want to spend the least amount of time, the least amount of expense, the least amount of brain damage, the most amount of money, the most recurring revenue, the least taxes, and so on. If you look at each of those 12, you'd find out that the amount of time that a lender puts into a deal is a lot less than an active flipper. The least expense, obviously, if all you're doing is creating paperwork and wiring money out and getting a bigger wire back, there's a lot less expense than there is if you're a flipper. Brain damage, that shouldn't be too difficult to figure out. Who makes the most money? Well, sometimes the flipper can actually make more money, but more often than not, it's about 50-50. Who makes the most amount of recurring revenue? Clearly the private lender. Who pays the least amount of taxes? Well, that's about a wash. Who has the least risk? Clearly the lender, because there's no slip and fall when you're owning a mortgage. Now, I could go down the list, but you can see for yourself that in every one of the 12 wants that I have in the perfect business, I'm able to check the box on all 12 of them as a private lender. And I love this built-in risk mitigation. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're the passive lender and you're lending 60 to 75% versus the active investor who either has equity or puts money in the deal, the question I always ask myself is, how likely is the active investor operator to lose money if things go south? And how likely am I, the passive lender, to lose money if things go south? And the answer is, if a property is worth, say, 100%, if it were to go down in value, or the rehab too long, or it take too much money, The active investor has a cushion of 25 to 40% that gets eaten away before we even get to my cushion of 60 to 70%. It's why I love this business. You and I can lend at 60 to 75% of the after repair value in a property and have so much cushion if the market were to change or if the active investor doesn't do their job right. Plus, we're servicing this number one need of real estate investors. And what is it? And what has it always been? And what will it always be? Simple. They need money. And is real estate investing going away anytime soon? No. So basically, we're servicing the number one need in all of real estate and making a handsome return for doing so. As Josh and I talk about it, we always say we love making three types of money: ungodly, obscene, and embarrassing. And sometimes we make all three in the same deal. The market opportunity for flipping and for lending to flippers is massive. If you look at the total financed purchase dollar volume, you can see it's on the rise. That is the number of flippers who need financing. And if you look at the percentage of those flips that actually require the financing, that's on the rise as well. And local private lenders like you and I do the lion's share of all of these loans. You might think that some of the big institutional Wall Street lenders do so, and they don't. In the last 12 months in San Diego, for example, more than 50% of all loans to flippers were by lenders who did fewer than 10 loans for the entire year. There was one lender, for example, that did over 100 loans, Anchor. There were two lenders, Quanta and Lending Home, who did over 60 loans, 7 lenders over 20. And as you can see then, it dropped precipitously to the point where 272 lenders only did one loan. Now that's called a highly fragmented market where there are all kinds of competitors doing very little volume except for a couple of big ones. Investing cash. Let's say you have cash to invest, and let's say you're given two options. You could invest in 10 buy and hold properties, or you could invest in 10 loans. Which would you prefer? Well, if you've got 10 loans, you literally have 10 electronic filing cabinets. They're basically just pieces of paper. And if you loan $100,000 on 10 loans, you have $1 million that you've loaned. And if that earns 15%, which as you saw earlier is doable, that's $150,000 a year. By contrast, if you own 10 rental properties and invested the same $1 million in cash, and let's assume that you got a 9% return, which would really be good on a net basis, because remember, you got to pay property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, taxes. You've got all of these other expenses. So let's say you net 9%, it's $90,000 a year. But here's the bigger question. What's more scalable? A private lending business with a group of electronic filing cabinets, or a private lending business that has all those realtors that you see down there, all those title companies, all the contractors, all the families who live in those properties, and you have to manage all of those relationships. Or you have to hire a property manager to do so, in which case your net return drops even further. Private lending is the perfect business. I don't know how else to put it. It's passive or active to set up. So we call it passive active to set up. And then it's largely passive and recurring. It's sustainable during market cycles because you're lending at a discount to the value of the property and you have that cushion we talked about before. It's replicable and scalable. You really have three choices. You can go big if you want to with your business like Josh did. You could stay small and keep it all if you want a lifestyle business, or you can do what I did, which is to just add a zero. It's really up to you to choose. And the yields are extraordinary and possible and doable. You determine and control your own risk. You're in the lowest risk position of anyone in the deal because you're the first one that gets paid at closing. You have a predetermined yield, so you can actually forecast your daily or monthly income. It's very easy to understand. You already understand it from this call. You get cash flow, otherwise known as income during the month, what we call mailbox money, or a profit share on the back end if that's the way you structure it. There's minimal staff, payroll, office, and overhead, or as we refer to it, very little adult daycare. It's a backpack business. All you need is a computer and smartphone. I've taken 14 international trips in the last 16 months, and our business continues to grow. There's no credit or income or track record required. You're servicing the number one in need in real estate. I love this. You're leveraging and arbitraging other people's money, other people's effort, and other people's time, and in most cases, all three, and tax free if you lend from your Roth self directed IRA. And oh, by the way, here's proof that private lending can permanently change your family's financial future. Imagine going big. You'll recall that I mentioned Josh, and he talked about his story in being one of the 4 founding partners in Lending Home. Lending Home's funding and valuation history looked like this. Josh left near the end of 2013. He and I were working together, and I became one of the first investors in Lending Home. Actually, my Roth self-directed IRA did. And Lending Home at that time raised $11.3 million on a Series A round. Less than a year later, they raised another $28 million on a Series B. Less than a year later, they raised another $70 million. And this was all equity. This wasn't debt that they were raising to be able to loan out to others. Lending Home eventually raised about $200 million in venture capital. And by November 2016, remember, they started in November of 2013. Within 3 years, they had a market valuation of $670 million. Is that amazing? In 3 years? Well, it got better. In March of 2018, they raised an undisclosed amount of money. And as it turns out, they became a member of the Forbes FinTech 50 list. Their valuation jumped to between $1 billion and $1.3 billion. And when they were on that list, it was as a result of having done more than $3.5 billion in loans funded at a valuation of $1 billion or more. Where else can you build what's called in Silicon Valley a unicorn? Only 300 of them have been built. Josh built one of them with his founding partners. His current co-founder in Sunday was the former CFO of Airbnb and built that company to a $30 billion valuation. And so now you have 2 people with private lending background being able to do amazing things together. So at this point, imagine that you're Josh and I. We were actually starting to feel guilty. In fact, I think that's Pablo Escobar over there. But we were starting to feel like that. Well, almost. We actually didn't mind making money. And if I get serious for a moment, I would tell you this. With the good fortune that Josh and I have had, we now get to not only make money, but make a difference. And that's why we're on the call now. We do not, as you can probably tell from what we've shared so far, need money. We've done unbelievable. Our family office has done extraordinary. But we decided to create and launch Just Be the Bank that we referenced at the beginning in San Francisco less than 2 months ago. We eventually ended up with 42 attendees because, as you'll see, that's all the room could hold. We literally started with a small room, and through referrals and only referrals, we got to the point where we had 29 attendees, 13 guests for a total of 42 people, and that's us at the Fairmont Hotel standing on the stairs for a photo. We shared everything that we knew. Spent 3 days sharing everything we knew. And we invited very successful friends like Gary Beasley, who's the CEO of Roofstock, who at one time was the CEO of a company that built a portfolio of 40,000 single-family rentals. We also invited Paul Stockamore, who at Lending Home was Josh's VP of Capital Markets and raised a $200 or $300 million fund that we were a part of. And we enjoyed ourselves at VIP events. We're not just about making money, we're about doing good and having fun. And when we do this event, we're able to do all three. That happens to be two dentists who are both friends of ours. And some of us even hung around an extra day and went to Napa for a wine tour and just a great day of having fun. And at the end of the day, if you can make money, do good, have fun together, it's like the best concept on the planet. So, as you can see, we're having a lot of fun there. So, rather than me tell you how the event went, I'll let others that many of you already know do the talking. Again, many of you know these folks, and I'm going to start with Randy Klein.
If anybody is thinking about coming to an event like this, well, first of all, be appreciative because nobody teaches this kind of stuff. Nobody.
You're not going to get an education like this and the experience they have. You're not going to get it anywhere else.
I just retired from being a dentist for 40 years, and for 35 years I looked for something like this. And 5 years ago I finally found it, and it's been a life changer and a game changer.
They're not trying to sell you on anything. They're actually giving you education.
For anybody who's interested in coming to the event, I'd say absolutely invaluable experience.
I would say that you are going to get at least 100-fold return on your investment.
Everyone wants everyone else to be successful, and you can really feel that here.
The Stecks are modern day Rothschild. So if you want to come learn from somebody that really knows what they're doing, nobody knows private lending like Dave and Josh and Blake.
So as you can tell, and of course Blake is my other son, Josh's brother, you can tell that a lot of people had a very positive experience. And in fact, we'll show you how positive in a minute, but this was an email after the event that I received from Randy. And he said, "Hi, Dave. Thanks again for a great event. After 40 years in dentistry and the last 5 as a part-time private lender, I now realize that I've been lucky. I've done a lot of investing in real estate and hard money lending funds and private loans with marginal people, doing inadequate due diligence, using loan docs that my borrowers provided, and having no real docs or tools to be able to vet deals or the borrower. I just didn't know what I didn't know." Wow. Something you said really resonated with me. Any idiot could have made money in real estate and lending in the last 7 years with the market booming. But in the next 7 years, part-time and full-time investors need to be smarter. Well, now after JBB, and I'm really glad that I brought Scott and Emily so that they can grow our legacy, of which private lending will be a big part. Everyone at JBB raved about the event. Kudos to you and Josh for doing good and making us all better investors. Thanks. And thanks to you, Randy, because we appreciate you. In fact, if we were to look at all of the attendees who were at the event, every single one of them, and we asked them all, how would you rate the Just Be the Bank workshop this weekend? At the end of the event, we handed out a one-page survey. And before I asked anyone to put their name on it, I asked them to complete the survey as though it were a blind survey. And then at the end, I asked them to put their name on it after they'd answered all the questions so it would be unbiased. The results were unbelievable. Everybody gave it a 10 except for a couple of people who gave it a 9 and one person who gave it a 10.5. So our average score was a 9.83 out of 10. I've never been to an event or talked to anyone else who's ever put on an event where they've had on a 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, a 9.83. We also asked, how willing are you to refer others to Just Be the Bank? And again, on a 1 to 10, the average score was a 9.69. Amazing. So how interested would you be in investing in an investment fund if my son Josh and I actually organized it, given our experience? This was probably the most important question, not because we were raising money. To the contrary, we weren't. But when you ask a question like this, it's one thing for somebody to evaluate an event. It's quite another for someone to give you a score and their willingness to put money with you. And the answer was, we received a 10.02. As you can see, somebody gave us an 11 and somebody gave us a 12, and almost everyone gave us a 10 out of 10. That's the confidence people had after having gone through 3 days worth of training on how to be a private lender. So let's talk briefly about what the Just Be the Bank curriculum looks like. We go through 3 days, but we actually condensed the third day. So last time we did the event, we did 3 full days. This time, day one is going to be a little longer. Day two is going to be a little longer than it was before, and we're going to condense day three. So what I'm going to show you is what we would normally cover over 3 days, but we're going to move some of this forward into day one and day two. We start out with why private lending. So important that we're all on the same page, talking about everything that's important, like terminology and outcomes. It's really important that we focus on your desired outcomes, not ours. We already know what we want to do and we've already done it. Question is, what do you want? So as I said, we get into terminology and we demystify private lending by talking about the 10 common objections and why there's an answer to every one. We talk about the 10 commandments of private lending. If you get these right, you will crush it. And then we actually get into case studies. So on the first day, we go through a pretty substantial case study that brings everything together on day one. That evening, we do a VIP event. And it's all about having fun and talking deals with a great group of like-minded friends. That's what we're all doing this for. We've all got a why. And this happens to be a photo from the top of the building that Josh used to live in with the most beautiful, breathtaking view of San Francisco. And then back to day two, where we talk about establishing your credit policy, your private lending blueprint. We're actually going to give you the blueprint on how you're going to start your business. It's going to be in 4 stages, the first of which is due diligence. Second is your funding. Third is then servicing the loan. And then fourth, getting paid off. And what do you do next? And then we're going to talk about another complete, full-on case study. Again, it's time to have some more fun. So we're going to have more fun, talk more deals with a great group of like-minded friends, which would be you. So that happens to be at the Cirque Bar in the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, which was the first bar that was opened after Prohibition, and we spent our evening there. On day 3, finding borrowers, establishing your business, using other people's money, wrap loans, which is an incredible way to make a lot of money with very little. You can literally get into private lending with as little as a few $1,000s and partner with others to make money. We're also going to share the insider tips for making what we call the obscene, ungodly, embarrassing returns that we've had the good fortune of making. And then we're going to talk about the future of private lending, what we call the Ambassador Program, and Josh is going to give you a little glimpse into that in a minute. But that's day 3. Now, some of this is going to get moved up to day 2 and day 1, but at the end of the day, you can see how much ground we're going to cover before we wrap up at the end of day 3. So, Josh, why don't you share just kind of a glimpse at the future of private lending, the ways we see this, because I think it's really important for people to get a perspective on not just what the current market holds for us in terms of opportunity, but what the future might hold.
Yeah, sure. I love this part. It was such a cool insight that we had as we were putting this together. So let me share it. So we, with purpose-built investments, we learned that the kind of impact that a private lender can have through personal, on-the-ground relationships. And I really learned that there isn't a replacement for that as I started building Lending Home. You know, Lending Home, there was a lot of great, amazing things we did there. And it was all because of the impact that institutional lending allowed us to have on a national scale. It was really exciting to see that, but it really was at the other end of the spectrum. And the trade-offs that I really noticed over building both of those companies were along the lines of cost, flexibility, and service. As one went up, one or both of the others tended to go down and vice versa. And let's just discuss these trade-offs for a moment. So institutional lenders, the obvious pro from a borrower perspective is that it's cheaper. It costs less. It's lower than URI or Dave are going to be willing to offer. That's no secret. How they're able to do it, though, it's sort of this insidious trade-off that they're making. And it's the major con from a borrower's perspective. So the 2 ways they're able to offer a lower cost of capital, a cheaper cost of capital for the borrower is Number one, the capital that they're receiving is cheaper. And so therefore they can offer it at a lower price. Well, the trade-off there is that they have to meet a tighter credit box in order to receive that cheaper capital from Wall Street. And that directly translates to limited flexibility. So they're a little straitjacketed in terms of what they can do. And now the second way that they're able to offer those low rates is because they keep operating costs low. They don't have people on the ground in every market. They aren't hand-holding and white-gloving service. And so the lower operating cost is a plus in that it allows them to pass through those savings in the form of lower cost capital, but it limits the service that, frankly, fix and flippers really, really, really appreciate and are willing to pay for in this business. So then on the other side of the spectrum, local private lenders, that's you and I and Dave. We're able to maintain higher rates because we really excel where the institutions fall short. It's flexibility and service. And as a result, we continue to hold the vast majority of the entire market as private lenders. Dave showed that on the San Diego example, but that is not unique. Frankly, San Diego is one of the more institutionalized markets, and it's still more than 50% of you and I and everybody else on this call making those loans every day. Less competitive markets, it's even more drastically represented by private lenders. So we strongly believe that despite the institutionalization of this space, which has been great for a lot of reasons, it will remain a local private game for a long, long time, if not forever. And the reason that private lenders are able to do what we just described, be flexible and offer better service, is because they're actually on the ground. And so we ask ourselves a question. We said, well, we've operated at both ends of the spectrum. What would a business model in the middle look like? Is there a way to bridge the gap and actually retain a lot of the pros of both models and shed as many of the cons as possible? And we think there is. It would, of course, leverage that local presence, which really does some unique things that institutional lenders that are remote from the market aren't able to do. It mitigates risk because you're able to now credibly take over the property if you have any issue with the borrower. It usually almost certainly doesn't get to that, but at least you're able to step in and see eye to eye and shake hands and be belly to belly with your borrower and creates real solutions rather than just going right into default servicing mode. And you can just provide such a better customer experience by being a value add lender. But the model would also then need to benefit from the cost savings of relationships with cheap sources of capital like Wall Street, of course, right? So it needs to be local, but then it also needs to be cheap, which is what the institutions have done such a good job of. If you could figure out how to retain both of those things and get rid of all the other negatives, you'd absolutely have the best private lending model that's ever been built. And we think we've kind of figured out a way to do that. And what really caused us to have this insight was a model that exists in venture capital. It's an amazing business that's been built that we share a little bit more about at the event. And it's figured out how to do this, retain the best of institutional capital while not losing sight of what really matters to, in the case of the venture capital model I'm referring to, the local small business that needs funding. They care about the relationship. It's the same way that the people we're lending money to in this space care about the relationship. So we're borrowing this idea from venture capital and we're putting it to work in real estate private lending. It's really exciting. We share that with you at JBB. We don't share it anywhere else. And then you have a choice. You either do it yourself or you do it with us, and we'll share a way that you can do that with us. And it's super unique. We don't know anybody else that's doing it. So that is what we believe. I know that's a little bit of a teaser, but that is what we believe to be the future of private lending, is a model that's in the middle.
Perfect. Look, I'm sure that teaser kind of whet your appetite a little bit, but I want to kind of take a step back and just let you know that the only reason that you're on this call is because someone on this call or prior to this on another call, or someone who was at our Just Be the Bank event thought enough of you to invite you. I can tell you this, that we ask attendees 2 questions that led you to us. Based on your experience at Just Be the Bank, after the 3 days we spent together, how willing would you be to refer others? On a 1 to 10, with 10 being the best, and I was very clear to tell them, do not tell me what you think I want to hear, because that doesn't serve either of us. Tell me what you really think. And you can see the scores here. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see a small number, which is 9.69. So you can see how compelled people were to refer us to others. The second question is, how many people do you think, having gone through this experience, you could reasonably refer who would be both motivated and qualified on a 1 to 10? Now, why is that important? Because everybody on this call is both motivated and qualified. I know that because you're all referrals from someone. You're motivated because you've either done some private lending or have wanted to do some private lending, and you're qualified because you've got the capital to do so. I mean, you could start with as little as a few $1,000s, but many of you have a few $1 million. So at the end of the day, we ask that question about how many people could those of you who've been through the event refer us to, and the answer blew us away. 197 people by only the 29 people, not including their guests, who attended. That's why we're on this call. If the answer had been 0, we obviously wouldn't have done another event. So what does it all mean for you? Well, due to the success of that event, plus this demand of 197 referrals, we're going to do this second event. So it's going to be for another 42 people, just like we did the last time. 28 plus 14. In other words, we're assuming everyone would bring, well, every 2 people will bring 1 guest. That's just how the math worked out last time. You may recall that 29 people brought 13 guests. We plan to refine what we did at Just Be the Bank, the first event, and make the second event even better. I can tell you unequivocally, it's training that you couldn't find anywhere else, and you're welcome to go ahead and look. We've tried to find other training. In fact, we created Just Be the Bank because we couldn't refer other people to another source for training. And why is that? Well, most private lenders really don't know what they're doing. I'm going to say 95% of people don't know what they're doing, and the few that actually know what they're doing don't want to share it because it creates competition for them. We'll not only teach you because we've done so well, but you'll also receive 40-ish tools and documents that we've actually created ourselves that will allow you to cheat off us. So we spent 6 figures on attorneys and financial guys to be able to create tools that we've been able to use, and you're going to be able to walk out with those tools. So you can spend 6 figures on your own and try to figure it out, or you can borrow ours. We'll also be providing insider access to this new ambassador program that Josh talked about. Again, we're not selling it, we're offering it up in the event that you want to do something together. But if you don't, do it on your own. As you heard one of the people say on their testimonial, we're not asking or trying to sell anything. We're trying to work with people who want to work with us. Our whole philosophy is to never sell anything, but simply to share and attract like-minded people who want to do like-minded things. So we're doing Just Be the Bank again. It's in Tampa, Florida. We're keeping the price at the same level that we had it before, and you'll understand what that asterisk means in a minute. The date is October 4th, 5th, and 6th. Remember, we're going to have 2 long days on Friday and Saturday from 8 to 6. Followed by 2 evening events where we're going to have a great time. And then Sunday, we're going to start early at 8 and finish up at 1. In the evening, as I mentioned, we're going to do VIP parties with what we call our 4% and 1% friends. That's you. If you're not already aware of it, roughly 3 to 4% of Americans have a net worth of $1 million or more. And to be a multimillionaire, you're in the top 1% in the US. To be a decamillionaire, that is a net worth of 10 million or more, you're in the top probably 0.2% of all Americans. And so that's the group that we assemble because we want you to be around what we call fewer betters. You're going to leave with the training that we wish we would have had when we started private lending. We had to figure all this out ourselves. You're going to get a thick printed workbook where we're going to actually print out all the slides and then have a notes section where every time a slide comes up, you can keep your notes current. And you're going to get those tools and documents that I mentioned before. You're basically going to walk out of there ready to do either your first loan or your next loan and do it the right way. And for those of you who are doing private lending, you already probably know that there's something that you're not doing right. And in most cases, you don't even know what you're not doing right. I can tell you to a person that everybody who went through this event said that they've been doing lending wrong. Not 100% wrong, not completely wrong, but wrong in a lot of ways. And we're going to teach you the right way. More great news. And this is where these asterisks comes in. I spoke with my uncle. You may have heard of him. His name's Sam. And it turns out that he told me that if you and your accountant believe that this is a legitimate education or business expense, you'll receive a tax deduction for the full amount, just like we would as investors or business owners. Depending upon what your marginal tax bracket is right now, it could be 30 to 50%. That just cut the investment from $7,500 to $3,750 if you assume that between federal and state and self-employment and FICA and Obamacare, if you add all those things up, there's a good chance that you're in the 30 to 50% income tax bracket. Everyone loves a little gift from their uncle every once in a while, and so should you. So then the question is, once you know what it costs, the answer is, what's it worth? And the way I always look at things is it an expense or an investment? Well, you tell me. In my opinion, it's priceless. Now, I'm not going to try to justify the value to you because most of you, especially those of you who are doing loans or know Josh and me, you already get it. But for the rest, I'm going to ask a simple question. What would it be worth to do just one extra $200,000 loan the right way, with the right checklist, with the right tools and documents that you can replicate over and over and over again, tens of thousands of times like Josh and I have? The math is pretty simple. A $200,000 incremental loan for 6 months at 2 points and 12% interest, which is very reasonable for the borrowers that you're going to be targeting, is $16,000. Now, if you were to do 10 of those, just 10 in a year, you'd make $160,000 and be in the top 6% of household income in the United States. Now, I probably don't have to tell you if you did 100 and made 1.6 million, you'd be in, as they say, the high cotton. So you can take as long as you want, but our whole philosophy when Josh and I started PBI, Purpose Built Investments, and eventually Lending Home when he left and did that, was speed and greed. The quicker you can get to where you're trying to go, the more money you're going to make over the life of your career. We've done 30,000. What we just talked about was one loan or 10 loans or 100 loans, and we've done 30,000. Yes, we started small. Then we added a zero. Then Josh went a lot bigger. So you get to choose. All we know is that one extra $200,000 loan is a 2 to 4 time return on your investment. And I don't know where else you're going to get an opportunity like that. And oh, by the way, we'd like you to, but you don't have to, bring one business partner or spouse or adult son or daughter, what we call a legacy partner, someone who's going to continue the business, just like Randy brought his son and his daughter. And you can do so at a significantly reduced cost of $2,000 to be able to contribute toward our cost. Here's our only challenge. Space is limited. This is not some scarcity play because, as you know, we don't need the money. But we've done one webinar up until this one. This is our second webinar. And we're now confirmed at 32 people for our upcoming Just Be the Bank event. Now, that was as of 6 a.m. this morning, but I think it's 32. As I said earlier, we're capping the attendance at 42. Why? Just felt like the perfect size last time. We were able to have an inordinate amount of one-on-one interaction, both during the day at the event, at lunches, at VIP events in the evening. So basically, we just decided to book a small room again. that fits the same size audience so that we can give you the personal attention that we'd want if the roles were reversed. Last time, 1 out of 2 attendees brought a guest, as you saw. We had 29 attendees and 13 guests, totaling 42. So the math is pretty simple. If we've got 10 spots, we can accommodate 6 to 7 of you off this call and 3 or 4 of your guests. And that's it. We're done. There's more than enough of you, way more than enough of you on this webinar right now that we're sure we're going to fill the remaining seats, and then we can laser focus on the event. We're doing all this through referrals, as I mentioned earlier, so we're not going to spend a lot of time marketing. We're not spending any money on marketing. We're just doing 2 webinars, putting together an event, and then having an amazing experience together. Now, you might ask yourself, can I just buy this course online? And the answer is no. We're not a seminar company. We don't write books. We don't put together what we call crap in a box that you buy off the internet. We're only doing this live. It happens to be October 4th through the 6th, which is a Friday, Saturday, and half of Sunday. So you literally can fly in Thursday night, take 1 day off Friday, and then spend the weekend with us and leave Sunday afternoon and be back to work on Monday. It's a serious, interactive 2.5-day education where we fit in 3 days worth of education. Now, I can promise you that there's no private lending training like it, and I know that because we've looked. It doesn't exist, and no family, even if it did exist, has our deal count or our success rate. And all we simply hope is that you'll join us at Just Be the Bank. So now it's basically decision time. We're not going to try to create anything that's tricky here. It's just basically 3 decisions that you're going to make. The first is, yes, I'm in. And if you are, we're excited. We're going to spend 3 full days with you, and you're going to learn more than you ever thought was possible. And there's no fluff in this 3 days. It's all hard-hitting stuff. Or you're a yes, but. Maybe you've got a question. Maybe you're wondering, can I bring 2 people? Whatever it happens to be, you've got a yes, but. So that could be your second answer. Or the third is no. If that's the case, there's no need to reply. But if you're a yes, I'm in, here's where we go next. Bear with me. You're going to email Kathy at Purpose Built Investments if you're an I'm in or a yes, but. So you're saying, yes, I'm in. What I want you to do is put in the subject line, I'm in. And then in the email itself, put your first and last name. If you have a guest, put your first and last name of your guest or say no guest, and then the best phone number to reach you at. That's it. We don't want it to be any more complicated than that, and it looks like this. So you're emailing Kathy at purposebuiltinvestments.com. I'm in, your name, your guest name, your phone number. Now, 3 things I want to mention. The guest must be a business partner that is a bona fide business partner or a spouse or a legacy partner, what we call an adult son or daughter that you want to do this business with or set them up to be able to do it in the future. If you're a yes, but, ask your question in the email. So put yes, but in the subject line and ask your question. I just want you to know that we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone, and we have, because our desired outcome is to make sure that we build a like-minded community of people that we want to be with. We call it doing fewer bigger things with fewer better people through fewer deeper relationships. So that's it. It's nothing more complicated than sending Kathy at Purpose Built Investments here at the end, and built with a T, so plural.com. Just say I'm in. We would love for you to do so. So that's it. Now, the last thing I simply want to say is this. In case you haven't figured it out, and I think I mentioned it, Josh and I don't need your money. He's busy building what are called unicorns, billion-dollar companies, and I'm looking forward to enjoying more of my life than just making money. But we genuinely enjoy doing good, and this is a significant give back that we're committed to. We want to help you and your family get to where you're going quicker. We believe private lending, being the bank, is the best business model on the planet. The Rothschilds did it before us, and we did it ourselves without their help. So I know you can do it with our help. Simply send Kathy an email that says, yes, I'm in, or yes, but. Give her your question or tell her you're in, and she'll get back to you tomorrow morning on next steps. So that's it. On behalf of Josh and I, we look forward to seeing you at Just Be the Bank. And Josh, thanks so much. I love you, bud.
All right. Thanks, Pops. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.